Hello everyone, I am the Warped Adventure, back again with another deck talk. And this deck talk is going to be finally on my Wulfgar of Icewind Dale deck, otherwise known as Puppers, otherwise known as Werewolves of London, otherwise known as Attack Until I Die. Whatever you want to call it, basically, I swing all the time. I get triggers off of swinging. I love to swing, and I love wolves and werewolves. And so you mash it together, and that's what I call a fun time. First things first, if you notice, we're back to the wolf mat. And if you'll notice, the deck box for this deck is the same as the mat, and the sleeves are the same as the deck box, are the same as the mat. Full matching set. I love it. The mat was a gift. The sleeves were a gift. And to the Friday Night Magic I go to, someone gave me this, seeing that I had almost a full set. They gave me the deck box, and so now I have a full matching set for this deck. This deck means quite a lot to me, because back in my early days of playing Magic, I had a wolf deck, and it really wasn't good. It was a mishmash, and it wasn't a commander deck. It was a 60 card. Um, and and well, I brought it to school one day because I was playing Magic when I was going to school, and the locker room, the boys' locker room was broken into. Some dude took some wire cutters or bolt cutters or whatever and broke into the lockers, and my deck was stolen. Along with the deck box, that didn't really matter, but the deck had it meant a lot to me, and it was stolen, and so that was a few years back. I think this deck I built about a year ago, and now it's actually a powerful deck that becomes arch enemy almost every single time it is played. And so, let's get started. First off, we got ramp. Um, Again, we'll start with the obvious stuff and move from there. Um, First off, we got cultivate. Got a super cool art for this cultivate. Not to show off, I just think it looks really nice. It's pretty obvious why that's in here. You fetch two basics, one to field tap, the other to hand, and it helps you ramp. Then we got Sky Shroud Claim. It costs 4, and so it costs more than Cultivate, but you fetch 2 forest cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. There's two things really nice about that. It doesn't have to be basic forests, and so you could fetch Cinderglade and Highland Forest straight to field, and unless they say otherwise, though, like this one says it enters tapped, but unless they say otherwise, they'll enter straight untapped and you can use them. And if you happen to already have one of these on field, you could just grab a basic. Regardless, it's a super nice spell, and it's it's just insanely helpful. Next up, we got Weaver of Blossoms. It is a werewolf, and so it has daybound. So while it's day, it's on this side. When it flips to night, it hits the other side. This side, you tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and it's a 2/3. And when it becomes night, it flips into Blossom Clad Werewolf. 3/4, tap, add 2 mana of any one color. And I guess this is as good of a time as any to explain the day-night mechanic. So, when you first play a daybound creature, it becomes day. It can never start off as night unless something says otherwise. And daybound, as it becomes day, transform all nightbound permanents. And so when it becomes day, so when it flips from night to day, everything that's currently nightbound, you flip it back to daybound. And if a player casts no spells during their own turn, it becomes night next turn. So if someone casts no spells during their turn, doesn't matter who it is, the very next upkeep, it flips to Nightbound, and all the Daybound creatures flip to night. Um, a lot of people don't like the day-night mechanic because it gets supposedly confusing. But generally the person who's using the day-night bound, the day-night mechanic, should keep track of it. And so I always just tell those people if you don't like it, don't use it. And so to get it from night to day, if a player casts at least 2 spells during their own turn, it becomes day the next turn. And so it just keeps flipping back and forth until, well, until the game ends. Now, continuing on with Ramp, we have Utopia Sprawl. As Utopia Sprawl enters battlefield, choose a color. Whenever Enchanted Forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds additional 1 mana of the chosen color. So pick green, enchant one of your basic forests, and say red. And when you tap it, you add a green and a red. Or you say green, it taps to add 2 green. It's super helpful. Really nice turn 1 ramp, because it means turn 2 you'll have 3 mana. And turn 3 you'll have 4. Turn 5 you could get Wulfgar out like that. Super nice, insanely helpful. If you get it out turn 2, then look at that. Now you can tap in Forest for 2 and get something else out as well. Regardless, we got the cheapeners, which I put in with ramp because it made sense. Goblin Anarchomancer makes your red and green spells cost 1 less. And then we have Goreclaw, Terror of Kal Seisma. He's 4 for 4/3. Creature spells you cast with power 4 or greater cost 2 colorless less to cast. And whenever he attacks, each creature you control with power 4 or greater gets +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. So he does 2 things. He attacks and buffs your creatures, and he cheapens your spells, which notably your commander costs 5 and he's a 4/4. And so if you have Goreclaw on turn 4, then you could play him out on turn 5 for 3 and possibly play a 2-cost creature along with him. Now, I guess I should explain what Wulfgar does. He's cost 5 for a 4/4. He has melee. Whenever this creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each opponent you attacked this combat. And so if you attack all 3 opponents, he gets +3/+3. But if a creature you control attacking would cause the triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. May sound confusing, but it's pretty simple. Whenever a creature you control attacks, if something would trigger because of it, you get that ability twice. So like Goreclaw, instead of giving all your creatures +1/+1 when he's attacking and trample, it gives all your creatures +1/+1 and trample, and then again gives your creatures +1/+1 and trample. So they get double trample. Doesn't do anything. But this whole stack is attack triggers. And so basically you just want to be swinging all the time and getting a whole bunch of value out of swinging. And hence why this is my swing and lose deck. Because I keep attacking and eventually someone's going to kill me or I kill everyone else. And it's super enjoyable. Every time I play it, people get excited because it's just a fun deck. It's not like insanely complicated. It's not complicated at all, really. I guess stacking your attack triggers kind of matters, but besides that, you got a few board wipes, you got some fights, you got a little bit of removal, you got a decent amount of artifact and enchantment hate, but main thing is wolves and werewolves and attack triggers. So, moving on to attack triggers. First off, we got Werewolf Pack Leader. He's a 3/3 for 2. so that's nice. It has pack tactics. So whenever he attacks, if you attacked with creatures with total power 6 or greater this combat, draw a card. That in itself is really nice because if that would trigger, you get to draw 2 cards. Which this deck, I'm looking for more ways to draw cards and probably add some more impulsive draw in here because it has quite a few ways to give itself a bunch of mana. It just doesn't have a lot of ways to use that mana, I think is the issue. Anyways, moving on, we got Sardian Avenger. He's 2 for a 1/1 first strike trample. Whenever he attacks, it gets plus X plus O until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts your opponents control. Whenever an artifact an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, Sardian Avenger deals 1 damage to that player. So he's super nice. So if you're facing like a treasure deck, they could easily have like 15 treasures. He swings, he'll get plus 30 plus O, and he's a first strike trample. And so that is a pain train, my friend. Because even if another thing has first strike, he'll still hit at the same time as it, and that damage will plow over still. And so this is the only way to really stop him is just kill it. Because over time, he's going to shoot you for sacking your treasures or whatever. He's going to be swinging as a massive creature, and Wulfgar will double that attack trigger so he gets even bigger, and it just gets out of control. And it costs 2, so you play him turn 2. It's really, really, really nice. Moving on, we got Tectonic Giant. Costs 4 for a 3/4. Whenever he attacks or becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, choose one. Tectonic Giant deals 3 damage to each opponent, or exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one of them until end of your next turn, you may play that card. So it's really nice. It gives you some impulsive draw, or yes, thank you, good talk. Do tell. You done? Thank you. Sorry, that was a train coming by. So, Tectonic Giant. He costs 4 for a 3/4. Whenever he attacks or becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, choose one. He either deals 3 damage to each opponent, or exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one, you can play it until end of your next turn. So basically, he can either give you a good chunk of impulsive draw if you have Wulfgar out, he'll give you exile top 4, you choose 2 of them and you can play them until your next turn. Or, whenever he attacks, he deals 6 damage to each opponent, or 3 damage to each opponent, and then 3 damage to each opponent again. Whichever you want to say it does the same thing. So, yeah. This is why it gets targeted. It's because it ends games rather quickly when it gets going. It isn't a speedy deck by any means, but when it's going, it ends the game like that. Next up, we have Hexplate Wallbreaker. Cost 5, and it has Mirrodin. It's an equipment, and has Mirrodin. When this equipment enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 rebel creature token, then attach this to it. Equipped creature gets +2/+2. And whenever equipped creature attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap each attacking creature after this phase. There is an additional combat phase. Equip for 4. So, let me explain how this works with Wulfgar. So when he attacks, it'll see that it's the first combat of this turn, so there'll be another combat after that. Then that ability triggers again, and seeing that it's still the first combat, there will be another combat phase after this. And so that pushes the first one out of the way. And so now there's going to be 2 more combat phases after this combat phase. But generally, that means the game's about to end. So expect this to either get dealt with or you win the game. That's how that works. Extra combat phase stuff normally in decks that love to swing a lot, it normally just ends the game. So next up, you got Pathbreaker Ibex. 6 for 3/3. Whenever Pathbreaker Ibex attacks, Creatures you control gain trample and get plus X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So here's how you stack this. You're attacking all three opponents, and Wulfgar, you make sure Wulfgar's attack goes first. So he gets +6/+6, making him a 10/10. Then do Pathbreaker Ibex's 2 attack triggers, so all your stuff will gain trample, including Wulfgar, and all your stuff will get +10/+10, and get +10/+10 again. And so that makes Wulfgar a 30/30 trample that basically one-shots because he's your commander. And at minimum, your creatures will be 30/31s with trample. If this swings with Wulfgar at 3 opponents, the game ends. Which is why you won't be able to swing with Pathbreaker probably. This deck needs more hasty boys. Ways to give stuff haste. But I still enjoy this deck. It's chaotic fun, and you can't beat that. Moving on, we got Goblin Trap Runner. This one's fun. He's 4 for a 4/2. Whenever he attacks, flip 3 coins. For each flip you win, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. So basically, with Wulfgar, that means you'll flip 6 coins and get a 1/1 goblin for each flip you win. It's really chaotic because one time it came down to how many flips I won from Goblin Trap Runner. And I ended up winning all 6 flips. And so that's how much I needed to end the game, or else I would have died. It's so chaotic to just leave the game down to a flip of 6 coins. Chaotic, hard to control. This deck is I love it. It's hard to beat this kind of fun. Next up, we have Guild Artisan, 2 for a legendary enchantment background. Not as background because Wulfgar doesn't have choose a background, but it's still in the deck. Commander creatures you own have, whenever this creature attacks a player, if no opponent has more life than that player, you create 2 treasures. So as long as Wulfgar is out, which that ability needs him to be out to work, so when he swings, if you're attacking the player with the most life, then you create 4 treasures. Really nice. It's a way to ramp. This deck loves to ramp and take advantage of said ramp. It's fun. Next up is Doors of Durin. 5 for a legendary artifact. Whenever you attack, scry 2. Then you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. The rest doesn't really matter because you don't have any dwarves in here. And you don't have many, if any, elves in here. Excuse me. Take that back. You have at least 1 elf in here. Still. Next up is Oran Reef Ooze. 3 for a 2/2. When it enters battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever it attacks, put a 1/1 counter on each creature attacking with a 1/1 counter on it. So basically, if he attacks, for each creature you control that has a 1/1 counter on it, put 2 more 1/1 counters on it if Wulfgar is out. Oran Reef Ooze is really nice, especially if you put the counter on itself. That way it has an easier time swinging. And generally you have stuff to put 1/1 counters on your whole team. At least a few, two different ways in here, I believe, that do it multiple times. Next up, we have Krenko 10th Street Kingpin. Whenever he attacks, put a 1/1 counter on him, then create a number of goblins equal to his power. So, a lot of people are really confused normally when about Wulfgar's ability, or with Krenko's ability in general. Basically, he swings, then he gets the 1/1 counter, and then you get 2 goblins, because that's his power. Then, if you have Wulfgar, that ability triggers again. So you put another 1/1 counter on him, then get 3 more goblins. So the first time you swing with Krenko, while Wulfgar is out, you get 5 goblins in total, and Krenko becomes a 3/4. And yeah, that's how it works. Next up, we have Battlecry Goblin. 2 for a 2/2. He has an ability +2. Well, you pay 2, a colorless and a red. Goblin creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. Whenever he attacks, if you attack with creatures with total power 6 or greater this combat, create a tapped and attacking 1/1 red goblin creature token. So that ability triggers twice. So you get 2 goblins that are tapped and attacking. Battlecry Goblin may seem not that crazy, but he's actually really, really good early game. Because basically that means you could be swinging at everyone early game. Like you get Wulfgar out, swing with Battlecry Goblin, and just have a goblin going at everyone. And if you have enough goblins, start buffing them all, and Battlecry Goblin could end the game. But generally, it's just a way to get more bodies into the attack. Next up, we have Rada Erdekeld. 2/2 for a red and a green. Whenever she attacks, you may add 2 red. Keep in mind that red will go away at the end of combat, so it's there to pay for abilities if you need to. Then she also has tap at a green, so she can ramp you, or she can just give you extra mana to use during combat. Which, if you have War Cadence out, will mean every time she attacks, you can at least pay 4 mana into War Cadence, making everything. Yeah, we'll get to that card. Again, she's really nice. Not crazy good, but still. Next up is Durnan of the Yawning Portal. He's 4 for 3/3. Whenever he attacks, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may exile a creature card from among them, put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may cast it. This spell has Undaunted. So Undaunted just means it costs 1 less for each opponent. So he attacks. You look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile a creature card from among them. You can cast it after the combat ends, but then you do it again. So every time he attacks, he can give you 2 extra creatures to cast, which this deck loves. Like I said before, it needs more ways to draw cards and impulsive draw, and he basically just always gives you access to extra creatures, which is really nice, which is why he normally gets killed. Next up, we have one of the possible win cons that people have been killing off your wolves and stuff, which normally happens. 5 for 3/4 Kessig Cagebreakers. This card was in Marin. I have 2 of them, probably more than 2 of them. Whenever Kessig Cagebreakers attacks, put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking for each creature card in your graveyard. So normally this deck gets a lot of its creatures killed. Normally there's decent amount of board wipes in this. So casting Cagebreakers could be a way you could end the game after getting kind of stomped by board wipes. I built this deck with the idea in mind that it's going to be arch enemy at least once during the game, and you need to make sure your Gruul decks can handle being arch enemy. If you don't build them with that in mind, they're probably going to become arch enemy and then lose quite quickly. But that's why there's an entire pile dedicated to combat tricks to keep yourself alive longer. And Kessig Cagebreakers means that after getting hammered into the ground and you have like graveyard full of all your best werewolves and stuff, you can swing with Kessig Cagebreakers and get a bunch of wolves on the field, tapped and attacking for each of them, and just start punching people in the face for a lot. And a fun little combination is with that Pathbreaker Ibex, if you make sure the Kessig Cagebreakers ability goes first, then you get all those wolves. Let's say there's 10 creatures in your graveyard. You get 10 2/2 wolves onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Let's throw 3 at each opponent and 1 at the opponent with the most life. So it's 3 at 2 of them, 4 at 1. And let's throw Kessig Cagebreakers at the one with the next most life. Then Pathbreaker Abex gives them all, let's say you have Wulfgar attacking 2, It gives them all plus 10, and trample twice. Oh, and you actually get 20 wolves because Wulfgar's out. Normally, Wulfgar gets targeted out the gate. He hits the field, and you get one attack off, and then people just try and kill him as soon as they can because this dude is terrifying. He's devastating. Moving on to the protection based stuff. First off, we have Tybalt's Trickery. Obviously, it costs a red and a colorless. It's an instant counter target spell. I know, it's a red counter spell in a Gruul deck. I love saying that. And then choose 1, 2, or 3 at random. Its controller mills that many cards, then exiles a card from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost, then put the exiled cards on the bottom of their library in a random order. So basically, it's a chaotic counterspell. You counter something, they mill, you roll a d6, 1, 2 is 1, 3, 4 is 2, 5, 6 is 3. Let's say you roll a 5, and so they mill 3, and then you're countering some terrifying board wipe or whatever, right? And so they that goes to graveyard, it's countered, they exile, and then they, I don't know, they hit a Sun Titan. Something crazy like that. It's super chaotic fun because it doesn't matter what they hit as long as it's not a land, they cast it for free. So yeah, it's a counter spell, so it can save your butt, but it also can make your day worse than it was. It it's one of those that are like, I put it in here because come on, it's a red counter spell in a Gruul deck. Who's gonna expect you, of all players, to be countering their spells? Next up, we have ill-tempered loner. This one, I put him in the protection because generally when he hits the field, if he's nightbound, nobody's swinging at you. Let me explain why. So the daybound side, he's a 3/3 for 4. If he would be dealt damage, he deals that much damage to any target. That in itself is really good. So whenever he's dealt damage, it for each instance of it, like let's say he's getting 3 damage from 3 different sources, so that's 9 damage. Then he could throw 3 damage at each opponent, just for him being hit for 9 from 3 different sources. But his Nightbound side is Howlpack Avenger. He's a 4/4. Whenever a permanent you control is dealt damage, Howlpack Avenger. Our friend is back. Yes, hello. Welcome back. Anything else to say? Goodbye. Yeah. Can I continue? I don't know if you guys hear that, but there's another train going by. Quite possibly the same train. That would be funny. Anyways, Howlpack Avenger. He's a 4/4. Whenever a permanent you control is dealt damage, Howlpack Avenger deals that much damage to any target. So basically, um, whenever one of your planeswalkers are dealt damage, you just shoot any target for that much damage. One of your creatures are dealt damage, shoot that much damage to any target. Yeah, you get the point, right? Whenever anything you control is dealt damage, you deal that much damage to another target. And that gets out of control. Because if someone tries to full send at you, you just throw a bunch of 2/2 wolves in front of their 10/10s and stuff. And then let's say 4 10/10s are coming at you. You block with a wolf on each of them. You kill them. Because then you just throw 40 damage back at their face. And I don't know about you, but that's terrifying. And so you generally don't swing in at Howlpack Avenger if he's on the field. And it makes swinging at other people actually quite nice as well because they don't want to block. Because whatever they block with is it's going to be dealt damage, and then I can take that damage and pick apart their board with it. Or I could just throw it back at their face. You can also use it as a sort of political thing. If you've been trying to get someone to block and they're just like to get rid of one of their pieces and they're not doing it, I don't know, throw a 2-2 at a dude with a 10-10 and say, hey, if you block with your 10-10 and kill my 2-2, I'll throw that 10 damage at that planeswalker and get it off the field. It can be a sort of targeted removal on a stick if you can, and it lets you make deals with your other opponents, which might get you in their good graces, which in a Gruul deck is far more important than you know. Moving on, we have Leyline of Combustion. 4 for an enchantment. If Leyline of Combustion is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. So, there you go. Whenever you and or at least one permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, Leyline of Combustion deals 2 damage to that player. Excuse me. So basically, you begin the game with it on the field if it's in your opening hand. So that's really, really, really nice. Then, later in the game, let's say someone's about to take out Wulfgar, they take 2 damage for it. Or let's say they have 10 targets on your field, and it's just like, what is, like, a fireball that's, they're paying to target a whole bunch of your stuff. Just deal, like, 20 damage to their face. Over time, Leyline of Combustion can help you a lot, because you have a lot of threats that people are going to want to target out the game. Because removal is important in Commander, and a lot of people play removal for good reason. And that good reason is you. Whoever plays this deck is the reason that removal is played. So you want to at least punish them over time for picking apart your board. And along with the fun stuff like that, your deck loves to punch people. The lower your opponent's lives are, the closer you are to perhaps winning, or at least getting as many kills as you can, because that's what this deck came for. It woke up and chose violence, and its violence is going to be his axe or hammer or whatever that dude's carrying, plummeting into your opponent's faces. And that's the glory of it all. Next up, we have the cheaters. There's 4 cheaters in here. Let's begin with Green Sun's Twilight. Cost green and X colorless. Reveal the top X cards plus 1 of your library. Choose a creature card and or a land card from among them. Put those cards into your hand and the rest of them on the bottom of your library in a random order. If X is 5 or more, instead put the chosen cards onto the battlefield or into your hand and the rest bottom of your library in a random order. So the nice thing about that is you pay 6 and perhaps you just so happen to dump out your Pathbreaker Ibex. But if you, for some reason, like get an Apocalypse Hydra from it, you don't want to dump that straight to field. It'll just kill itself. So you could just choose to put it to hand instead. Or if you just need the ramp, you could be really, really sad and choose a land instead of Apocalypse Hydra. You know, those kind of depressing moments. Next up, we have Savella Ice Shaper. I know you've heard that name before. It's because I just made a deck on him, but he's a really good card, so I put him in my Wolves. 3 for a 2/4. You can pay 3 colors, tap, and create a colorless snow artifact creature token, or token, not creature. It's not a creature. It's just a token. Ignore my stupidity. Named Icy Manolith, and it taps for any mana. It taps that any. Gah! It taps to add 1 mana of any color Read the script. I don't have a script. That's just, you get the point. I'm being an idiot. Quite usual. Next up, we have Court of Bounty. Cost 4 for an enchantment. When it enters battlefield, you become the monarch. So monarch means at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. And if an opponent would deal combat damage to you, they become the monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you're the monarch, instead you may put a creature card or land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Basically, it can either ramp you if you're not the monarch, and if you are the monarch, you can just cheat out a big expensive creature like Pathbreaker Ibex or perhaps Goreclaw, and then cast Wulfgar in the same turn, and then cast a 2-cost creature in the same turn. It's glorious. Amazing stuff. Everyone loves it. No debate. And if you don't love it, you're wrong. You secretly love it and you just don't want to admit it. We all know it. It's okay. We're here for you. Next up, we have Halpak Piper. 4 for a 2/2. This spell can't be countered. You can pay 2, tap it, to put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If it's a wolf or werewolf, untap Halpak Piper. This is one of those few werewolves where the daybound side is better than the nightbound side. But I understand why the nightbound side is the way it is. So, on the nightbound side, it's a 4/4, and when this creature enters the battlefield or transforms into Wild Song Howler, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. The rest go to the bottom in a random order. So basically, when you're cheating out your creatures, but you're going to run out of creatures in your hand eventually. So, when you flip it to Nightbound, you go get an extra creature to hand. That way, when it flips back to Daybound, you have another creature to cheat out with the Piper. Which is just, all in all, really good. I love this card. In my humble opinion, it's better than Elvish Piper. Elvish Pipers, I think it costs 2, or it's a 1/1 for like 2, or 1/1 for 1, or 3, 4, I don't remember. Regardless, you pay a green, tap it, put a creature from your hand on the battlefield. And the only reason this would be worse is, for one, it costs 4. And it costs 2 to activate its ability. And the actually important part is it can only be activated during your turn and not during combat and not in response. Because it's activate only as a sorcery. So you can't respond to things with it. You can't do anything like that. So basically, I believe normal Elvish Piper can use it in response or on other people's turns. Pretty sure. It's an older card, so I doubt they even had sorcery speed activations. I don't know. Regardless, but another reason why I'd say this is better is it can't be countered, and if you put out a wolf or werewolf, you untap Halpak Piper, so you can keep doing it and cheat out perhaps your whole hand. So, I guess Elvish Piper is better in non-werewolf decks, but Halpak Piper can be put in non-werewolf decks easily, and I'm pretty sure Elvish Piper is expensive as hell. This is not expensive as hell. So this is the cheap man's version of Elvish Piper. And in my humble opinion, perhaps because I love wolves way too much, Halpak Piper's better. Come on, guys. Get with the times. And the times say Elvish Piper's a bad card, and you shouldn't play it. I don't mean that. Elvish Piper's a broken card. Next up, we have the impulse draw or card draw or just helping you cast more stuff. First up, you got Cosmos Elixir. Does 2 things for you. It costs 4 for an artifact. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card if your life total is greater than your starting life total. Otherwise, you gain 2 life. So most of the time, it's going to be gaining you life. And that's something this deck appreciates more than you know, because when it gets to that late game, your life is going to be really low because people are trying to kill you. because you are the threat. And so even that tad bit of life gain over the span of the game means a whole lot when you're down to the 5 digits. Because going from 5 to 7, and 7 to 9, 9 to 11 means a whole lot. Unless your opponents have like 20/20s and stuff. In that case, you might just be dead. Unless you have a very defensive board, which, you know. Next up, we have Vivian, Champion of the Wilds. 3 for a Planeswalker. 4 loyalty. You may cast creature spells as though they had flash. And +1 until your next turn, up to 1 target creature gains vigilance or reach. So, she can protect herself by giving your Apocalypse Hydra reach, which, in my humble opinion, it should already have reach, but it doesn't. Or you could just give it vigilance. Oh, I'm stupid. No, it just gives it vigilance and reach. So, Apocalypse Hydra will swing and still be able to block that terrifying flyer that's giving you an issue. You see, this is how my brain works. I have a million ideas at once, and they all try to come out at once. And then it fails, and I sound like a complete idiot because I'm like, wait, I don't know, how about this? And it's chaotic. Anyways, -2, look at the top 3 cards of your library, exile 1 face down, and put the rest bottom of your library in random order. For as long as it remains exiled, you may look at that card and cast it if it's a creature spell. So, there you go. It's quite helpful. Again, you want to find more creatures to keep casting and keep your game going. And so you need more card draw. And I just so happen to not have a lot of card draw for this deck. And so over time, I'm giving it more card draw. Hence Vivian, hence the Cosmos Elixir, hence the Werewolf Pack Leader. Werewolf Pack Leader. More and more card draw is important. Next up, big creatures for big creatures' sake. We got my old favorite card in all of Magic, Apocalypse Hydra. Costs a red and a green and X colorless. It enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters on it. If X is 5 or more, it enters with an additional X/1/1 counters on it. You can pay 2, remove a 1/1 counter from it. He deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Yeah. When I was younger, I liked big creatures. Simple, to the point, I like to beat things with big creatures, hence werewolves. Well, at the time, when I first made a wolf deck, it was just wolves, not werewolves and crazy stuff. But Apocalypse Hydra, let's say you soak 12 men into it, X into it, 10 into its X. Sorry. 10 into its X. Then it'll enter with 21/1 counters on it. And in this deck, you have a decent amount of ways to give your stuff trample. So, yeah, that's gonna be an issue people need to deal with. And over time, you can just start pinging stuff by paying 2 and removing a counter. It's a lot of fun. Next up, we got board wipes. There's 2 of them. Start with Chain Reaction. 4 sorcery, deals X damage to each creature on the battlefield. 4. Chain Reaction. Cost 4. Deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. 20 creatures on the battlefield, everything takes 20. If there's 30, everything takes 30. When you're casting it, it's just going to be a board wipe. Keep in mind, if you're casting it with, I don't know, how about a little bit of a Howlpack Avenger out? Everything is about to take 30 damage. Oh, and I have 10 creatures? Game over. I'm just going to deal 30 damage to each of my 10 creatures. And you'll take 90. You'll take 90. You'll take 90. And I'll throw an extra 10 at you. Good game. That's a win con, but it's a 2-card win con, so keep that in mind. Otherwise, this is straight up board wipe, and that's a lot of fun. Next up, you have Mism Mortars, kind of one-sided board wipe. 2, it's a sorcery, deals 4 damage to target creature you control. However, it has overload, so if you pay it for 6, instead of saying target, it says each. So it deals 4 damage to each creature you don't control. And that's going to kill a lot of their important creatures, and their bigger creatures will live through it, sure, but they won't have many left, and you'll have your full board left. So you cast that and swing for game. A lot of fun. Next up, we have fights. Fight, fight, fight. It's a lot of fun. First up is probably one that I think should be played way more often. It's a highly underused card called Boxing Ring. Cost 2 for an artifact. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it fights up to one target creature you don't control with the same mana value. You can tap it to create a treasure, activate only if you control a creature that fought this turn. Keep in mind, that counts creature tokens. So you can have your creature tokens fight other people's creature tokens, and most of your creature tokens are wolves, which are 2/2s. Most other creature tokens are 1/1s. So, yeah, remember swinging with that Kessig Cage Rakers and creating 20 2/2 wolves? Yeah, just go and have them fight 20 tokens. And boom, that's probably going to kill most of your opponent's tokens. Keep in mind, though. No, it doesn't have to fight. It says up to. Okay. No, I'm an idiot. Don't keep in mind. That's even better, actually. Keep in mind, it doesn't have to fight. You could choose up to. It says up to, so you could choose 0. Because it says up to 1, and that means 0 or 1. So you could choose to not have it fight if you played your commander and you don't want it to fight that 6/6. Yeah, I don't blame you. That wouldn't go over well. Your 4/4 would not beat their 6/6. But occasionally, like if you played up Apocalypse Hydra, which its mana value is technically 2, because um unless it's being casted, its mana value is X's mana value is 0 unless it's being cast. So when it's on the field, its mana value is 2, and so when it enters, you can have it fight. I don't know that impassioned orator, which is gaining your opponent a whole bunch of life. Yeah, no, just have your Apocalypse Hydra fight it, because that's a fair fight. This is not a fair fight. That is a rigged boxing ring. Apocalypse Hydra. In one corner, we have an Apocalypse Hydra. And the other, some dude who's really good at speeches. Fight? Wouldn't go over well. And one that I've never been able to cast, because he's a freaking devastating force. Gruul Rage Beast. 7 for a 6/6. Whenever Gruul Rage Beast or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature fights target creature an opponent controls. So, you play it, you have this 6/6 fight your opponent's creature. You start dumping creatures out, they all start fighting and taking out all your opponent's stuff. It just means good game. Because at that point, they're not going to have much to block with. If you have a Hellpack Avenger out, you put out a 2/2 token and have your 2/2 token fight their 20/20 and throw 20 damage to their face. Or even if it's just Ill-Tempered Loner out, you play him as Ill-Tempered Loner. Gruul Rage Beast says, hey, fight. So there you go. It's devastating. Keep in mind, this is not a May ability. It has to fight. When something enters, they have to fight something. So you could possibly be in that situation where you just drop your Kessig Naturalist, and there's no creatures with 1 power on the field. that it can fight and live through. Which I doubt you'll be having that issue. When you get to play Gruul Rage Beast, he costs 7. By that point, you're going to be spending your mana on more powerful creatures than a Kessig Naturalist. Unless you have nothing else to do, in which case just hold that in your hand until someone drops a 1/1. Regardless, it's a devastating force, and it will probably make you arch enemy when it hits the field, because no one likes their boards being ripped to shreds. Moving on to the part I'm sure we've all been waiting for, the wolves and werewolves. We all love a good wolf, right? First up, let's start with the Pup Patrol. I hate myself. Hate it. But it's the Pup Patrol. We got Fearless Pup. It costs 1 red. It's a 1/1 first strike, and it's boast. So you can pay 3. If it's attacking, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Its flavor text is the best. It simply says, ah woo. See if you can read that. You see that? It's adorable. Look at him. Ah woo. Ah woo indeed, my friend. Ah woo indeed. Next up is actually quite a devastating creature in a wolf deck. It's Pack Song Pup. It costs 2, and it's a 1/1. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control another wolf or werewolf, put a 1/1 counter on Pack Song Pup, and when Pack Song Pup dies, you gain life equal to its power. So basically, over time, as long as you have a wolf or werewolf out, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually it's like a 20/20. Then you swing with your Kessig Cage Breakers, and all your stuff gets +40/+40 and trample, and, well, people are just dead because you're swinging. Someone's dead because you're swinging at someone with a 60/60 trample. And if they, for some reason, kill it, well, you gain 60 life. Either way, I'm pretty sure you win. That or you kill a few players because hard to live through that. Next up, we have, let's start with the wolves in general, yeah? Yeah, I think we will. So, next up, we have Runebound Wolf. This could possibly be a game ender for someone. It costs 2 for a 2/2. You can pay 4 and tap it. It deals damage equal to the number of wolves and werewolves you control to target opponent. So, you pay 4 and tap them. Let's say you have, in total, 24 wolves and werewolves. You shoot an opponent for 24 damage. Yeah, that hurts. Even if you're just paying for and tapping it to deal like 7 damage to target opponent, that still hurts. And doing that every turn hurts even more. It's great. It's a pain train, my friend, and you could do it in response too. So if someone's like on death's door and you have a Runebound Wolf out, you could just say, hey, hey, hey. You do literally anything that would normally harm me, and I will kill you in response. Then they have to be your friend. Basically, you're holding a gun to a guy's head and saying, be my friend. Be my friend or else. And at that point, you made a new friend. That is making friends with Patrick. Tad note, don't 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 make friends that way. It's not conducive to a good friendship. That's not personal experience. just don't do it. But it's funny to joke about. Now we got Night Pack Ambusher, 4 for a 4/4 with flash, so you can cast it at any time. Other wolf and werewolf creatures you control get +1/+1. So it's buffing all your wolves and werewolves. You'll love to see it. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't cast the spell this turn, you create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. A strong leader means a growing pack. Sorry, I love that. Anyways, yeah, basically, if you couldn't cast anything in a turn, he'll give you a wolf. He'll buff all your other creatures that are wolves and werewolves, and then he has flash, so you could cheat him out when someone's attacking you and jump scare them. It's great. Next up is Immerwolf. Basically a must-have in any werewolf deck. Cost 3 for a 2/2. It has Intimidate, so it can only be blocked by red, green, or artifact creatures. And other wolf and werewolf creatures you control get +1/+1. And non-human werewolves you control can't transform. So that ill-tempered loner, or that Howlpack Avenger, it's stuck as a Howlpack Avenger. It can't turn back. Keep in mind that makes Howlpack Piper a lot worse. It means you just can't cheat things out with it. You're stuck with your 4/4, and it doesn't attack and fetch you the creatures, so it just stays as a 4/4 with no abilities, basically. So, um, yeah, yeah, it can be an issue, but generally, it's super helpful. Next up, we got Kessig Naturalist. Moving on to the werewolves, by the way. Costs 2 for a 2/2. Whenever it attacks, add a red or a green. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Basically, it gives you an additional red or a green when he attacks. If you have Wulfgar out, it gives you additional red and a green, or 2 red, or 2 green, or whatever. To use during uh, combat, or you can use it during your main phases, because you don't lose as steps and phases end. However, you don't keep it when you end your turn, because it's only till end of turn. So just keep that in mind. Next up, we have Mayor of Avabrak. Oh, sorry. Kessig Naturalist's other side, I need to get used to that, is Lord of Ulvenwald. He's a 3/3. Other wolf and werewolf creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever he attacks, you add a red or a green. You know, his steps and phases end. So basically, he's the same thing as his other side, except he's now a 3/3, and he buffs your other wolves and werewolves. Also, just look at that special art for him. It's gorgeous. Look at it. And you have to see the other side, because the other side has a pupper, and everyone loves puppers. Look at that. It's a pupper he's holding. And the art's also really cool. Sorry. Sorry. Next up, we have Mayor of Avabrook. 2 for a 1/1 human. Other human creatures you control get +1/+1, which even that side's helpful, because you have a decent amount of humans, one of which is your commander. But at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells are cast last turn, transform him. Basically, it's like Nightbound and Daybound, but he doesn't actually have Daybound and Nightbound. So while your other creatures could be on their night side, he could pop in on his day side because he doesn't have Daybound. This was before Daybound and Nightbound were a thing. His other side, so when he flips to his other side, he is Howlpack Alpha. 3/3. Other wolf and werewolf creatures you control get +1/+1. So he's another creature that loves to buff your other wolves and werewolves. And at the beginning of your end step, you get a 2/2 green wolf creature token. You'll love things that give you more wolves. And if you if a player casts 2 or more spells during their last turn, he transforms back. A lot of fun. More ways to get your wolves and more ways to buff your creatures. Next up, we have who used to be the commander of this deck, Tovalar, Dire Overlord. Basically the best commander for werewolves, but I wanted to do more with this deck. So Tovalar is 3 for a 3/3. Whenever wolf or werewolf creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Keep in mind that's not an attack trigger, that's a damage trigger. So not as good as it could be, but still really, really, really nice. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more wolf and or werewolf creatures, it becomes night, then transform any number of human werewolves you control. So he forces things to become to transform if they're not werewolves already, if they're in their human forms. Because he has Daybound, but it also means like something like Mayor of Avonbrook, who wasn't around, who doesn't have um, Daybound and Nightbound, he will still transform them. His other side is Tovalar the Midnight Scourge. He's a 4/4, and whenever he still has the card draw thing, same thing, but he also has pay red and a green and X colorless. Target wolf or werewolf you control gets +X/+O and gains trample until end of turn. So basically, as long as it's your upkeep and as long as you have enough wolves and werewolves, he can keep it as night, and he will be able to buff your scary wolves and werewolves to become tramplers that are huge if you have enough mana. A lot of fun, but I'd say Wulfgar of Icewind Dale is a better commander. Next up, we have Gyre Reach Bandit, 3 for 3/2 with haste, and it has Daybound Nightbound. So its other side, it doesn't have Daybound Nightbound. It has Daybound Nightbound without saying Daybound Nightbound. Her other side, I believe that's her. Yeah, her other side is Vilden Pack Alpha, 4/3. Vilden Pack Alpha, 4/3. Whenever a werewolf creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may transform it. So, a little bit of a fun thing with that is, uh, so let's say she's at this side. Then you draw Pack Piper while it's Nightbound. She enters, and you can stack your triggers. So her trigger goes first. So Wild Song Howler enters. You get a creature from your top 6 to hand, then throw the rest to the bottom. Then, because it's a werewolf, Vilden Pack Alpha will allow you to flip it back to becoming Pack Piper. And so, then, even though it's Nightbound, Vilden Pack Alpha will be able to flip it back to its day form, so that way you can keep activating its ability. Or most of the time, you can flip it when it enters as its daybound. Well, it's not daybound. Like, let's say you drop Ill-Tempered Loner, he will flip to Nightbound immediately, or you can keep him as his daybound side. Again, Vilden Pack Alpha is super helpful and super great. Next up, we have Hound Tamer. 3 for 3/3, has trample. You can pay for it to put a 1/1 counter on target creature as daybound. The other side is Untamed Pup. It's a 4/4 trample. Other wolves and werewolf creatures you control have trample, and you can pay for it to put a 1/1 counter on target creature. So there you go. You can give all your other wolves and werewolves trample to make them easier to swing with, and you can buff your wolves and werewolves with 1/1 counters. Or you can buff anything with 1/1 counters, which this deck likes to do a lot, which you'll see here soon. Which you've already seen a decent amount of ways to get 1/1 counters out. Next up, we have Master of the Wild Hunt. Another way to fight, so I guess you should have been in the fight area, huh? But cost 4 for 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, credit 2/2 Wolf. Then tap all untapped wolves you control. Each wolf tapped this way deals damage equal to its power to target creature. Then that creature deals damage equal to its power divided as its controller chooses among any number of those wolves. Confused yet? Well, all that means is I call this dude Mosh Pit Guy, because you tap him, you tap all your wolves, and you start a mosh pit, and everything starts fighting each other. You pick what joins the mosh pit by choosing what your wolves deal damage to. then those creatures you're choosing can deal damage. Like, let's say this wolf is dealing damage to that one. This wolf is dealing damage to that creature. The creature this wolf is fighting can choose the that to deal damage equal to its power. Like, let's say it's a 3/3. Let's say it's a 3/2, I should say, and that one's a 3/1. Then this one can deal 1 damage to this wolf and 2 damage to this wolf. And that one can deal 1 damage to this wolf and additional damage to this wolf and additional damage to this wolf. And everything dies. But if you're like a 1/1 here and a 1/1 here, your wolves are about to kill them. They could both deal damage to this wolf to kill this wolf. So it's a mosh pit because the creatures that these wolves are fighting, don't have to fight back against this wolf. It can fight against another one of the wolves. Does that make more sense? No, it's okay. It when I tap Master of the Wild, when I tap Mosh Pit guy, it gets confusing because then all my wolves start fighting, and then everyone's like, "Wait, how do we fight back?" And I'm like, "Deal damage how you want. It doesn't matter. It's a big mosh pit. It's just a bunch of people fighting each other." So I put him with the fights again. Then moving on to the 2/6 cost werewolves. First up, we have Wolfkin Outcast. Cost 6 for a 5/4. He costs 2 less to cast if you control a wolf or a werewolf, so most of the time he'll just be 4 for a 5/4. He's daybound, so when he flips to nightbound, it is Wedding Crasher. He's a 6/5. Whenever Wedding Crasher or another wolf or werewolf you control dies, draw a card. So if some of your wolves and stuff start dying off from fights you're doing or whatever, you start drawing cards from it. Again, drawing cards is really important in this deck. So even though he's an uncommon, he's still a really good wolf. And he cheapens himself, which is nice. And if you have your Goblin Anarchomancer and Goreclaw out, that means he will just cost 1 green for a 5/4. That is really good. I don't know if you know this, but that's good. And finally, we have Tovolar's Huntmaster. 6 for 6/6. When he enters the battlefield, create 2/2 wolves. And his nightbound side is Tovolar's Pack Leader. He's a 7/7. Whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, you can create 2/2 green wolves. And if he's attacking to create the wolves, Wulfgar will create 2 more wolves because he loves attack triggers. And you can pay to have another wolf or werewolf you control fight target creature you don't control. So basically, he can start making fights. He's basically like he's a rage beast on a stick. Super nice. Now moving on to the more token focused stuff, we have Peregrine Took. I love this dude. He's 3 for a 2/3. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, create those tokens plus an additional food token instead. Then you can sacrifice 3 food to draw a card. Really nice. Then next up we have Feed the Pack. Cost 6 for an enchantment, which at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a non-token creature. If you do, put X to 2 green wolf creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is the sacrificed creature's toughness. So basically, let's say you just finished swinging with your Wulfgar. He's a 10/10 still. Then you could sacrifice him on end step to create 10/2 wolves. Or, more accurately, let's say you just casted your Apocalypse Hydra and he has 21/1 counters on him. You sacrifice him on end step and create 20/2 wolves. If a Peregrine Took out, created food as well. Everyone likes food. And again, why Peregrine Took is in here is card draw is great. So over time, you could create some food from creating all the tokens you normally create, and just create some card draw as well, basically. And again, feed the pack, really good card. Next up is one of my favorite parts of this deck, the combat triggers. Let's start with the more offensive one. It's War Cadence. 3 for an enchantment. Pay X and 1 red. Creatures can't block this turn unless their controller pays X colorless for each blocking creature. So, yeah, this is what I was referring to when I was talking about Rada Erdekeld. So, let's say you just swung with Rada Erdekeld, adding 4 red mana to your mana pool. You pay 1 red for the red mana and 3 into the X. So your opponent, so whoever's blocking this turn has to pay 3 colorless for each creature they're blocking with. Not each creature they block, each creature they're blocking with. So stack blocking, you still have to pay 3 for each. Use 1 creature for each, you still have to pay 3 for each. And if you dump enough mana into it, it could just say, no one is going to block this turn. And saying that means your Apocalypse Hydra, who could possibly be a, let's say, a 30-30 if you dumped enough mana into him, and Wulfgar and a whole bunch of other stuff swinging, and then people just can't block, and people just die. It's a great one. It's a fun combat trick. And keep in mind, you can do it on other people's turns too. So, you can make deals with people for like, if you swing at that dude, I'll pay for War Cadence and they won't block. Or something like that. And you could keep the attention off of you. Um, don't just activate it without making deals on other people's turns. Because if you activate it on somebody else's turn without making a deal with them, then you also have to pay to block. So only do it when they have committed to the attack. Then you activate it if you made a deal. Otherwise, just don't bother. You use that part of its funness for making deals, because deals are important, especially for this deck to keep itself alive. Next up, we have the more defensive stuff. We'll save the best for last, so fog effects. Well, first off, we have fog. A green, for an instant, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Yeah, it's a fog effect. I don't know what you expected from me. Then we have Jaheira's Respite. 5 for an instant. Search your library for X basic land cards, where X number of creatures attacking you. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So, yeah, no, someone's full sending at you, just cast this in response and fetch a ton of basics to field tapped and stop the damage, and perhaps they'll get the crackback they deserve. Then, my favorite combat trick to play against like a deck that just popped off and they're super confident. They're like, "I'm about to kill you. What you gonna do about it, huh?" And I'm like, "So how many spells do you cast this turn?" And their faces drop because everyone knows when you ask that, you're about to cast a storm spell, and their life just got a whole lot harder. It is Weather the Storm. It is probably one of the more like less used storm spells, but it costs 2, and it's an instant. You gain 3 life and has storm. So for this kind of deck, it is hilarious because somebody just cast, like, let's say they were playing a Cascade deck, easily cast like 30 spells in a turn, right? So they're swinging at you thinking, and I swing for game. People say that a lot, right? And I'm like, you swing for what? Sorry. Say that again. I swing for game. I'm gonna cast Weather Storm, and I'm actually gonna gain 93 life. You're dealing how much? 50? Oh, sorry. I thought it was a bigger number. I go down to. Oh, sorry. I go up to 56, let's say. And yeah. It is hilarious to play. And every time I play it, everyone at the table busts out laughing because it's a spell nobody plays. I've never seen Weather the Storm in any other decks, but it should be played way more often in decks like this, where you become arch enemy a lot. And so when they're trying to deal with you, they're going to be casting a lot of spells to try and deal with you. Let's say they cast like 6 removal spells. On their end step, you just weather the storm, and you actually gain 21 life. And it's easy for somebody to cast like 6 spells in a turn that they just popped off in. And it costs 2. You don't have to leave much mana open for it. It's basically just like ramping on another person's turn or tutoring on another person's turn. But in my humble opinion, it's better than tutoring because screw tutors. Play your deck how it's supposed to be played. Don't have to find specific cards. Building your deck around 3 cards, I think, is stupid. Unless 2 of those cards are in the command zone. In which case, you're building your deck around 1 card, which is even dumber, in my opinion. I have an opinion and I'm sticking to it. Next up is 1/1 counters. Sorry, this is a much longer video than usual. So, we got Kami of Whispered Hopes, 3 for a 1/1. If 1 or more counters would be put on a permanent you control, put that many counters plus 1 on it instead. You can tap to add 1 mana. Well, sorry. You can tap it to add X mana of any one color, where X is with Kami of Whispered Hope's power. So at minimum, it taps to add you a red or a green. But because of its ability, you can start dumping counters on it, so it taps to add 15 red. Really nice. Then you have Hardened Scales. If 1 or more 1/1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many counters plus 1 are put on it instead. It's 1 green for an enchantment. Really good. Then we have Ozolith, the Shattered Spire. 2 for a legendary artifact. If 1 or more counters would be put on an artifact or creature you control, that many counters are put plus 1 are put out on it instead. You can pay 2 and tap to put a 1/1 counter on target artifact or creature you control. So if you have all 3 of these out for every let's say you're about to play like Loyal Guardian, who is a 4/4 for 5. He has trample and Lieutenant. So at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So if you have that out, it's actually going to put 4 1/1 counters on each creature you control. That is ridiculous. I don't know if you knew that. It's ridiculous. Then next up we have Avabruck Caretaker. 6 for a 4/4 hexproof. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 1/1 counters on another target creature you control. And it's a werewolf. So when it flips to its werewolf side, it is Hollowhenge Huntmaster. It's a 6/6. She is a 6/6 hexproof. Other permanents you control have hexproof. So which gives literally all of your stuff hexproof, including itself. Because it has hexproof, it gives all your other permanents hexproof. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 1/1 counters on each creature you control. So again, if you had the 3 1/1 counter extras, so Hardened Scales, Kami, and Ozolith, then it's actually 5 1/1 counters on each creature you control. If you have Loyal Guardian, then it's actually 9 1/1 counters on each creature you control. Though if you Avabruck Caretaker coming out, just generally means game over. Next up, we'll have removal. Chaos Warp and Beast Within. Both are very well known. I'm not going to explain them because this video is already super freaking long. And finally, Artifact and Enchantment 8. Manglehorn enters, destroys an artifact. That's a May ability, so if there's no other artifacts than ones you control, you don't have to blow them up. And artifacts your opponents control, ETB tapped. It's great. Just really hates on artifacts. You hear this? Thank you. Anyways, well, next, finally, we have Fade from History. Cost 4 for sorcery. Each player who controls an artifact or enchantment creates a 2/2 green wolf creature token, a bear creature token, then destroy all artifacts and enchantments. So basically, it's saying, I hate how many artifacts and enchantments are out. So blow them all up. Get them all out of here. But you can have a bear. One bear. Any one bear. It's a bear. It's not a bear for each. It is just a bear for one of them. So, oh yeah, lands. So, in this deck, there is 35 lands. And for the non-basics, we have Highland Forest, we have Cinderglade, we have Game Trail, Temple of Abandon, Tyrite Sanctum. I've already explained that. We have Gruel Turf, and the two ones I'll explain. We have Bonder's Enclave, tap static colorless, or you can pay 3, tap it to draw a card, activate this ability only if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. Again, card draw is important, so having it on land is really nice. If you get desperate, pay 3, tap, draw card. And then you have Mosswort Bridge. Hideaway 4, so when it enters battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. Choose a non-land card. Well, exile 1 face down. Put the rest bottom of your library in order. This enters battlefield tap. Taps out of green. If you pay green to tap it, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost if creatures you control have total power 10 or greater. So it lets you cheat out a creature when you have enough power. Which basically, if you have Wulfgar out and you just swung with Wulfgar and a creature at each opponent, then just activate this and you can cheat out the card. And keep in mind, it could be a land, so you could you could play the land if you are that desperate. Which you have Wulfgar out. I don't think you'll be that desperate, but you never know. And this has been the Wolf and Werewolf deck, the Werewolves of London, the Puppers, the Awoo, the Best Boys, the Werewolves of London. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, think about leaving a like. I apologize for its length. I did not mean it to go this long. I guess I just had a lot to say about my wolf deck. So if you stuck around this long, thank you. You're probably the first and only one to do that. And stay safe, stay healthy. Peace out, guys.